laban sa mga Duterte, especially the previous president, whether this is on the gentleman's agreement front, whether this is on the EJK and human rights issues front. And then, of course, you have also no less than Senator Trillanes going back to back, boom, boom, boom. They got 1-2 punch. Also filing plunder cases versus Duterte, and also the ay, senador na pala ito. Akala ko ano na yung isa eh. Photobomber dati na yung isa. Okay, so, things are moving very, very fast. And to be honest, hindi ito... I doubt all of these things are super coincidental. I mean, there's always coincidence in politics, but I think many people are reading the situation. They're reading the situation and they're realizing things are moving in a certain direction. Ayan na, yung mga umatak kay Trillanes, sige, pagtatawanan nyo si Trillanes, nung time na nasa poder kayo, hindi nyo nga ma-eliminate si Trillanes, ngayon pa, bawin tayo ngayon si Trillanes ngayon. Lahat ng mga galit niya nung panahon ni Digong na hindi niya ma-effectuate. O ngayon, meron na siyang opening. So, and remember, nung pinagtatawanan nyo guys, nung pinagtatawanan nyo guys yung sinasabi ni Trillanes about ICC, pinagtatawanan niya kami. O, tignan nyo, sabi ko, wag kayong maniwala dun sa sinasabi ng gobyerno last year na, hindi, talaga against kami sa ICC, ganun. Oh, now, look at their statements, including by Menardo Guevara. Ay, sorry na lang kung may Interpol. Diba? So, either delusional yung mga iba dyan, or medyo kulang sa, mga gray matter. O, i-google nyo na lang ano ibig sabihin yan. Kasi, mahirap na i-explain. Alright, so going back to this, all of these elements are now coming together, diba? And the Congress is quite busy. I'll talk about the schedule thing as we go and discuss in more detail yung issue ng impeachment mismo. So yung House of Representatives has formed a super committee na mag-consolidate ng itong ongoing inquiries into Philippine offshore gaming operators, yung POGOs, yung questionable issuance of Philippine documents to Chinese nationals, yung current state of narcotics trade, and yung alleged abuses committed during the drug war ni Digong. Right? So, ang dami mga kaso na sabay-sabay sinasampa laban sa dating administration at dating presidente natin. Alright? So, ito yung sinabi ng Manila Representative si Abante, no? Chairman of the Committee on Human Rights, at isa sa mga kasama doon sa isa sa 4 panels composing etong super body nito. Sabi na he's the only one who can answer questions. All of us have agreed it is important to invite him to our inquiry because this concerns our national security. So, tignan mo, yung involved sa human rights, sinasabi niya may national security aspect rin. So, nagsama-sama na lahat. Alright? Kumbaga, ano na yan, damay-damay na yan. Lahat ng mga kaso na yan, they're coming together. Right? So, you have a super committee now that covers POGO, West Philippine Sea, corruption and human rights violations, lahat na yan sama-sama na ngayon. And of course, I think their hope eventually here is, and of course, the congressional leadership has called this a historic creation, no, unprecedented. Of course, Digong has snubbed all of itong mga hearings na to, pinagtawanan lang nila. But as this effort consolidates and more people join in, tignan nyo, pati nga si Harry Roque, hindi na maka-Flamengo ngayon. Medyo na-checkmate na rin siya sa Congress eh. So now you see there's a serious effort in the part of Congress talaga to pin down and say it's not one, it's not two, it's 4 committees coming together, and historic 4 committee. Magpakita ka na, right? And obviously if Duterte is not gonna show up, there are gonna be repercussions. I mean, there could be, I don't know, you could see. And of course, we already had a sense of that with what happened with Quiboloy. Remember, last year at this point, if someone said Quiboloy would face any kind of justice or be forced into a fugitive status, effectively, sabi mo, wow, untouchable yan. Meron pa nga yung billboard pa. Actually, yung billboard niya nandyan pa rin sa EDSA eh. But now, look at it. The guy is effectively a fugitive, right? Ang tanong lang ngayon, anong gagawin ng gobyerno? 83-in-1 ba nila? Isabay ba nila si Bantak, Quiboloy, at saka Digong if ever? Or isa-isay nila? Or they're keeping their powder dry because, they're waiting for the real move. Now, obviously, you could see na Sara Duterte's decision to also come out and guns blazing is because nakikita din nila na unti-unti sila, they're being besieged. Yung back and forth between Baste and the police chief, right? Yung reshuffling na nangyari dun sa Davao security services, right? So as Trillanes correctly pointed it out dun sa earlier interview natin that you can check, sabi niya, both in terms of money and muscle, talagang iniipit na yung mga Dutertes. And so much so that, as I said, speaking of House of Representatives, this is not only about paulit-ulit ng mga itong hair follicle test ni o yan, black na epal. Okay, going back to this. So, as Trillanes was saying dun sa isang interview natin earlier this month, diba? If you look at it both in terms of muscle and money, medyo mukhang openly nga, admit na nila na medyo delikado na sila. And so much so that there are now open conversations about Migs Nograles or the Nograles is somehow looking at their own options also in Davao. That maybe for the first time since 1990s, may laban ng mga Nograleses because they were always the junior partner or rather the let's just say the less strong party as far as the clash of dynasties in Davao was concerned, right? Davao was not meant to be a Duterte land, right? By just some twist of history, the Nograleses were checkmated by Duterte, but that was far from given. And in fact, there are some Davao analysts who argued back in 2015 that isa sa dahilan na tumakbo si Digong para sa presidente, and if ever hindi siya nanalo sa presidente, pagka-presidente, actually delikado na sila. That they were already showing signs of vulnerability. And then they went for gold, boom, Duterte becomes president, boom, the next 6 years they're in power, and then they think that BBM will just be a kind of a puppet, it didn't work out that way, and now things are turning against them. So there's also fluidity. And of course, the administration has the resources, has the machinery, and that puts them in a good position in case if they want to also pin down the Dutertes in their own very supposed backyard. I say supposed backyard because I have a lot of Davaoenyo friends who take offense if you suggest that Davao is a Duterte territory per se. It just happens that at this point in history, they have been the more dominant political dynasties. So, what does that mean, guys? What does that mean? So there are at least 3 scenarios we can look at here. And if you look at it, I always do that. I do scenario building. This is what I do in my political briefing, whether it's international, financial institutions, it's major counterparts or lectures. So if you look at it, bago naging presidente si BBM, I already gave 3 scenarios. A minimalist Marcos who will be very cautious, not self-aggrandizing, make sure ayusin niya, rehabilitate niya yung pangalan ng pamilya nila, and who knows, right? And then a kind of a semi-adventurous Marcos, mid-range, but not too aggressive because he has to still negotiate his way within the unity or cartel politics, if you call it. And then there's a maximalist BBM essentially replicating his father. I said the third scenario was very unlikely. It was really a question of whether we're going to see more of first or second scenario. And I was more confident of not necessarily the first scenario, but something between the first and second scenario. And that's exactly what we have seen. Pwede rin tingnan yung mga sinulat ko ukol sa foreign policy ni BBM. I said on foreign policy, though, I felt he will always be more like his father rather than Tatay Digong. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. What I mean by that is magaling maglaro ng mga great powers, magaling mag-statesmanship, at least in terms of speeches, at medyo assertive sa West Philippine Sea, which was really the legacy of Marcos Sr. So we can criticize the horrible human rights record, the horrible management of the economy, but when it comes to foreign policy and West Philippines in particular, in fairness, the Marcos Sr. didn't do too bad. In fact, probably he did, together with Ramos, I would say he had one of the best foreign policy doctrines out there. Now, so what are the scenarios we're looking at here? The low-intensity scenario, low-intensity warfare scenario will essentially be this. Patikim lang lahat yan. Itong mga super committee na yan, itong mga threats ng impeachment na yan, ito yung mga attack here and there na yan. But, let's leave it to midterm elections. At tignan natin dyan, magkakaalaman na lang tayo sa elections. So magdrama-drama kayo dyan. Kami naman, medyo tatakutin namin kayo, sabihin namin, medyo bukas kami sa ICC, baka ma-impeach ka mamaya, and all of that. But, we're gonna leave it to the elections. So, confident yung kampo ni BBM, they're gonna say, we have the momentum, we have the resources, we're the admin, and midterm elections in the Philippines are usually pro-administration. This will be the kind of a minimalist scenario, no? And then the Digong camp will say, okay, drama, end of the world, kawawa kami, magaling naman sila magdrama, ayan, pa-awa effect, pa-victim effect, although I don't know kung sino maniwala dyan. May mga naniwala naman, in fairness naman. I don't deny. Pag-usapan natin mamaya yan, di ba? But nevertheless, sasabihin ng mga Duterte, gamitin natin ng drama na to as a rallying cry. Medyo sablay-sablay yung mga rally-rally natin in favor of Kibuloy, yung mga sablay-sablay yung mga rally natin laban kay BBM. Pero magkakaalaman na tayo sa elections. At in fairness naman, base at least sa mga surveys, there's a good chance na 2 or 3 pro-DDS or DDS-leaning individuals could make it to the next Senate, and who knows, maybe patakboy natin si Baste or si Pulong. Let's see where it goes from there. And with Sara, bahala na what she's gonna decide. Although from what I hear, it looks like Digong is realizing baka medyo delikado sila sa Davao, so siguro siya na lang mag-mayor. And of course, being a mayor also puts him in a position of semi-immunity, right? Semi-protection. Kasi mayor ka ng Davao, so just in case things go south, mayor ako so I control this. So he'll have his own fifth. So that will be the minimalist scenario. So a lot of noise, a lot of barking, a lot of drama, a lot of bardagulan online and bardagulan rhetorically, but not much happening here. Not really much happening. The second scenario, I think, which is kind of the mid-range scenario, is there will be some people filing an impeachment, even complain against Sara. And right before elections, or just as the certificate for candidacy is filed, there's already a big move on the part of ICC. But the administration will not go for implementation of the ICC warrant. Ididribble nila yan, hintayin nila after elections. Of course, BBM will come out and say, no, we don't want interference. So, ulitin niya yung mga charot na yan. And then sasabihin niya, well, of course, we have an elections. We don't want to weaponize international judicial regimes and instruments to affect the democratic practice in the country. But deep inside, confident si BBM at alam niya naman niya, Damocles sword niya yung ICC. Yung kabila naman, medyo threatened, and then, because they're threatened, medyo desperate mode na sila, they might be even more aggressive than scenario number 1. But the scenario number 3 is before magsimula yung next year's elections, in fact, maybe before matapos ang taon nito, they will be filing of impeachment and there'll be some fuel and fire behind it. Okay, that's the kind of a civil war scenario we're looking at. Not civil war in the sense that they're two equally powerful camps. I think it's very interesting that if you look at the latest OCTA survey, it shows that it's hindi ito patas na laban, in the sense that it's not a 50-50 split. Far from it. If anything, pababa at pababa yung solid Duterte camp. Now, let's be absolutely clear, kasi nakikita naman yung mga magagaling natin, mga henyo dyan, sabihin, pero ang taas na approval ni Sara. I'm not talking about approval trust rating. I'm talking about when it comes down to it, saan ka tataya, diba? So the Duterte camp, from the previous OCTA survey we discussed with OCTA President si Ranjit Rai, my former professor and my friend, back then it was more like a 20-31 split, right? Not still 50-50, but you never know. I mean, you could imagine if Duterte's played their card well, the 20% of the Duterte side would go 25, and then the BBM side will come down to 25, and then magkakaalaman na lang sila doon. Because what was interesting with the OCTA survey, which, that was very interesting survey. Let me project it here. Sorry guys dun sa mga hindi niyo nakikita, but don't worry, I'm gonna bring out the final version of this. Makikita niyo naman. So if you look at the previous OCTA survey, the split was 20-31, and then around 44% undecided or wala nang paki sa politics kasi na-depress, nag-switch out, gusto mag-migrate, nag-love life, nag-jowa, forget about it, no? And then there was a lot, around 4-5% with margin of error of 3% who said, doon na kami sa traditional opposition, right? Now, the numbers have changed. So, from around 30-31%, umakyat na sa 36% yung team loyalists. Let's just put it that way. Obviously, let me just clarify, when I say team loyalists, I don't mean that all of this 36% now, from 31% to I'm not saying all of them have equal level of intensity. But nevertheless, all of these people, if they were asked a question, pipili ka, Digong, or Sara, or BBM, saan ka tataya? BBM sila. Alright? So there you have a significant 5-point increase dito sa kampo na yan, while you also see almost equal number but south, going downward, in the case of the DDS camp. Now they only stand at 16%, where things get very interesting. And let me palakin ko yan para makita niyan. Where things get interesting is how regional is, in short, how concentrated the base of Duterte's is. So if you really look at the solid Duterte base, I'm not talking about preference again, yung mga trust rating, mga ek-ek na yan. I'm talking about if it goes down to it, saan ka tataya? The Dutertes only have a 7%. 7% lang. And this is like what? Margin of error of what? 3%? Yan. Margin of error of 3%. So baka wala pang 4%, di ba? Wala pang 4%. Sa NCR, ang sasabihin nila na, ay, Team DDS kami. Sa Balance Luzon is even worse. The number is only at 5%. So with the margin of error of minus 3 or plus 3%, it could go down to 2%. Practically irrelevant. Naalala mo yung panahon hindi ko pinagtatawanan ng opposition. Balita ko, 3% na lang sila. Ayan, 2% na lang sa Balance Luzon potentially with the margin of error at pro-DDS. Sa Visayas, well, I think there's always this kind of a latent Vismin solid South base which goes beyond Mindanao, 11%. But look at it, guys. 50% sa Mindanao and 33% of Class E. So essentially the poorest of poorest folks sa ating bansa at essentially people mostly in Mindanao, sila lang talagang all the way Team Duterte, right? While on the other side, look at the numbers. 36% overall in the country, 43% sa National Capital Region, which generates what? Close to 40% of total economic output or more actually, 50%. Balance Luzon 42%, 32% in Visayas. Interestingly, sa Mindanao, 25% lang ay loyalista. A number that is not totally shocking. And I think Duterte coming out and attacking BBM and BBM being seen as, Davao, kinakawawa yung mga Duterte, obviously it's having an effect. So there's an element of loyalty, there's an element of propaganda, and I think the class element is also important because aminin natin, inflation is hurting very, very hard. Kung ikaw ay isang ordinaryong Pilipino, in fact, pati tayo, mga middle class, di ba? Na-feel natin yan. Lalabas ka, magpapogi ka, magpalibre ka, ayan, feeling mo, pogi ka, ganyan, tapos mabili. And then, shucks, ang mahal na pala, di ba? 30% more expensive than last year, ganyan. Even sa probinsya, syempre, taga Baguio ako. So, even nung umuwi akong Baguio, napansin ko, medyo umakyat ng presyo. Cebu was not as cheap as, or affordable as I thought. Sorry, I'm just being Ilocano. Medyo mapresyo din. In fact, yung binili natin food na Mediterranean because I like Mediterranean food and we just came from Spain and all of that. Parang, by the way, this is before si Atay nag-concert sa Taylor Swift. Parang, laki ng gastos. Medyo napapamahal ako. If you want to get good meat, protein and all, medyo mahal. You know, Mediterranean kind of cuisine or something like that. Anyway, so, I think there's also an element of inflation and the economy. Yes, 6% growth, fantastic. Pero tignan mo, purong napunta lang siguro yan sa mga mayayaman. Si Razon gained another $3 billion. $3 billion. So times 57 yan. My goodness, papunta na 160-70 billion pesos ang umakyat yung kanyang net worth over the past year lang. So it has been great time for the richest of the rich in the Philippines for the 0.00001%. But I don't think the 6% has been trickling down enough. And especially kung talagang nasa lower rungs ka ng socio-economic class, you're getting hurt. So that provides a room for the Dutertes to kind of position themselves. Tignan nyo yung panahon namin, ganito, ganyan. But let's not forget, panahon ni Digong, walang war sa Ukraine. Panahon ni Digong, he was enjoying all that fiscal space, all that savings from Pinoy's time. And then sinayang niya lahat nung pandemic, mismanagement, right and left, and all of that. But anyway, what I'm telling you here is that yung 16% na yan ay medyo deceptive because it's so concentrated in Mindanao and it's so concentrated away from really the center of power of the country. Now, obviously, I do believe that we have to diffuse power in the Philippines, not necessarily through federalism, but through strengthening LGUs, strengthening middle class and economic growth in different cities across the country. As I say that as a provinciano, I'm not from Manila, and minsan naiirita rin ako sa kayabangan ng mga Manilenyo. I'll tell you what, every time umuwi ako sa Baguio, right, obviously, yung mga kotseng dala ko is Manila plate number or something like that, diba? Or at least hindi taga Baguio. So akala na taga Manila ako. And then I speak Ilocano to them or whatever. well, not only do they get surprised, but more importantly, they realize I'm one of them, and then suddenly say, buti nga hindi ka taga Manila, kasi isuna, kasi whatever. Okay, so I understand that kind of anti-supposed Imperial Manila sentiment, but let's not forget, one of the biggest problem we have is karamihan ng ating mga LGUs, especially Davao, no, they're not really efficient in raising enough taxes. So actually tayo sa NCR, right, ay nagsasubsidize ng marami sa LGUs across the country. But anyway, mahabang usapan niya. I don't want to get into debate about federalism, but my point is, in the center of power, which is NCR, the support base of the loyalist and the pro-BBM, or at least the BBM, or at least anti-Duterte camp, is a huge plurality. While the pro-Duterte camp is almost negligible. 5%, 7% with margin of error pa. So it could go down by another 3%. So almost non-existent, right? So this is what we're looking at right now, diba? So in an all-out scenario, third scenario, even second scenario, I do not see massive protests in Metro Manila. I don't see massive protests in Baguio in favor of Digong or Duterte's or in favor of Sara. I just don't see that. I don't see EDSA. Well, I don't want to say EDSA 3 kasi yun na yung kay Erap diba? Nung pina-replace siya. But so I don't see that scenario but some, things going a little bit south in the south. Yes, that one I see, right? That one I can see. All right. But the question here is impeachment. Is it even feasible? Well, there are a number of issues here. So as you can see, medyo inisip naman natin mabuti. I'm looking at this from 10 different angles, right? Kaya iritang-irita ako dun sa mga iba na akala nila, you can do proper political analysis by just citing what's in the Constitution. Anyone can just Google what's in the Constitution and go with it, right? It's about looking at different moving parts and different scenarios and their likelihood. And then, of course, making sure that you know who are these players. Maybe you have met these players. Maybe you have conversation with these players. Maybe you can assess who is who, what is their psychological profile, what is their risk appetite, etc. Medyo may sinulat lang naman tayong libre about Digong. Medyo kilala naman natin yung mga fellow Ilocanos natin nandyan in power, mga ganun. Although, I remain critical of all. But anyway, going back to this. I mean, when it comes to the impeachment proceedings, let's just be very clear about this. The history of impeachment is not very encouraging for those who want an impeachment to happen. Now, I cheekily mentioned kahapon, what do you think about Chiz Oscudero as the next vice president? And you can clearly see that Chiz Oscudero has been positioning himself as a kind of a national figure-ish. May mga pa-review siya ng holidays, ng expenditure. I mean, I'm not against it, but some people wonder, like, what's going on here? Is he angling to be the potential next in line of succession? And as the Senate president, I think he has a pretty strong case to be in the next line of succession, although some would argue that it goes down between him and the Speaker of the House, and considering, the Romualdez Marcos connection, maybe it's not as straightforward. But from my understanding, I'm not going to say my sources, it looks like some people in power are not very worried if ever Cheese moves up. But anyway, that was not an endorsement of Jesus Guerrero, just to be absolutely clear about it. I have mahabang usapan niya, let's not go there. Tanungin niya lang si Grace po. Maybe I'll interview Grace po. Pag-usapan natin ang experience na running with. But anyway, going back to this. So, first of all is the logistics question. Kasi, ano bang date ngayon? August 9. So, September 30, magbe-break na. So, you barely have 1.5 months actually if you want to go with the impeachment proceedings. And ang dami nangyayari ngayon in the Congress as we speak. Budget issues, this super committee I was talking about. So, actually, it's easier to go with scenario number 1 at most scenario number 2 rather than scenario number 3 in a sense that I won't be surprised may magsasampa ng impeachment laban kay Sara. And just to be clear about it, just what are the grounds for impeachment? So if you go to Section 2, Article 6 of the Constitution, guys, it's very clear there that, yes, it is true na may immunity from suit yung top officials of the country, like President of the Philippines, for instance, I don't know, he did some minor crime, hindi mo pwedeng papakulungin, medyo complicated yan. But, nevertheless, right, there could be grounds for filing of impeachment, and this fundamentally and primarily goes through the Philippine House of Representatives and the Congress and the legislature at large because dapat eventually magsama yung dalawa. So ito yung mga grounds for impeachment complaints. Culpable violation of the Constitution. I'm not sure it will be too hard. Treason. Mahabang usapan yan, pero alam niyo naman, pinag-usapan natin yan with Justice Carpio, pinag-usapan natin yan with Admiral Ong, pinag-usapan natin yan with Trillanes, the issue of treason in peacetime. Some legislative gaps are there, but nevertheless, treason could be one of the grounds for impeachment. And, hello, West Philippine Sea, gentlemen's agreement, okay. Bribery, graft and corruption, betrayal of public trust. Yan, medyo my understanding is that could be also a ground against many people, hindi lang yung mga pinag-usapan natin dito, and other high crimes. So if you look at it, medyo it's a fertile and kind of a it's a fertile and large landscape ng launching pad just in case someone wants to file. So any member of the House of Representatives, I'm just explaining to you guys how this works. Any member of the House of Representatives can initiate a verified impeachment complaint. Actually, any citizen of the country can also file a complaint, but this should be endorsed by House of Representative member. So you can, if you think you want to file it, go ahead, find someone in the House of Representatives. But it's not easy. At least 1/3 of the House has to file a verified complaint or resolution of impeachment. And since, let's say, on average, 292 members of the House, so that means around 97 members of the House of Representatives should rally behind it. So is the number there? 97 doesn't look like too impossible. But nevertheless, it's not that easy. Now, hindi pa tapos ang usapan yan. Meron pang next step yan. A verified impeachment complaint should be filed dun sa Office of Secretary General of the House, and then it would be immediately referred to the Speaker of the House, in this case, Romualdez, and then within 10 session days from the receipt. So I'm just giving you a sense of medyo marami siyang steps dito eh. The Speaker shall include in the House order of business. In relation, dun sa complaint filed against, for instance, President Digong on March 16, back then si Pantaleon Alvarez had until May 23 to include it dun sa order of business. So the Speaker of the House also has some prerogative. Kung na-include na ito, then the complaint should then be referred dun sa isang House Committee on Justice within 3 session days afterwards. So we saw again this in the case of Duterte. Now, the House Justice Committee should then determine whether the complaint is sufficient in form and substance. Titignan nila yung ebidensya, titignan nila yung constitutional grounding, titignan nila yung basihan. And I won't be mistaken, of course, let's be honest, they'll also look at the political viability and implications and all of that, especially with the elections coming. And if there is, remember, probable cause, then pwede na yan. So, probable cause. A majority vote of Justice Committee members will then decide kung enough ba ito para magkaroon ng probable cause. So, I'm just explaining to you guys step by step, okay? Don't worry, I can forward to you materials for you to understand the mechanics of this. Now, hindi pa rin tapos yan. That's just the House. Now, after conducting hearings, the Justice Committee should file within 60 days from referral. So now you suddenly see there's suddenly 60 days. So now do you see the timing problem? So siguro hindi rin nakita initially dun sa timing problem. Parang okay, pwede. But dito when it goes to the Senate or sa bicameral, dito medyo time is an issue. So within 60 days from referral, a formal resolution to the House plenary regarding the impeachment complaint should be made. Kung may probable cause, then the committee will also submit a resolution setting the articles of impeachment. Dito, at least 1/3 of House of Representatives voting for the articles of impeachment will be needed for it to be endorsed to the Senate. This is equivalent 97 that I mentioned a while ago. Now, the impeachment trial now begins if you clear all of that. So you're already seeing September 30, October, medyo alanganin yung date lines, diba? The Senate then, speaking of trial, the Senate then will decide all cases of impeachment in a full-blown trial. In the case the President or the Vice President or Chief Justice, then medyo yan. No, in this case kasi Vice President, hindi naman President or Chief Justice Supreme Court. Okay. If two-thirds of Senate members vote to convict an impeachable official as outlined in the articles of impeachment, he or she will be removed from office. This translates to 16 out of the 24 current members of the Senate. So obviously, Bato will be with Sara, Robin Hood will be with Sara, Bongo will be with Sara. I don't know about Tolentino anymore kasi lumabas na siya sa PTB Laban. But that means that the pro-Duterte camp should just get 9 people, and it's not gonna happen, right? So aside from the usual suspects, they need 4, 5, 6 people, and it looks like it's easy to think about that. Historically, also, if you look at it, guys, the last time there was an impeachment that went all the way, in the case of Estrada, it didn't prosper a lot because the Senate blocked it. And nakagulo, and Estrada was not removed by impeachment per se, he was removed by military. If yes, there was obviously EDSA dos, but just like EDSA 1, if the military of the Philippines, I think in this case Angelo Reyes, if the military had not withdrawn support for ERAP, then wala. He could have still forced his case. So I'm just telling you guys how difficult, actually, technically speaking, an impeachment would be. So I think medyo malabo na magkaroon ng impeachment before elections, or at least filing of certificate candidacy. But you can imagine na baka magkakaroon ng convergence effect, na perfect storm situation. I think this is a very good point. A perfect storm situation, I think, is not impossible. Whereby the ICC comes in, whereby the super committee things come in, whereby at least 1 or 2 people will push, right, for an impeachment, and then maybe after elections, I think, then maybe they can move forward with that. But I think what's interesting here to keep in mind, guys, at sasabihin ko yan, I think mahalaga ito, guys. I'm not very sure kung I agree with Ronald, no, yung si fellow Big R natin, na after election is no more possible. I think it's very possible. I think if the administration does well, which is more than likely, but does very, very well, at sobrang konting manalo, let's say hindi manalo si Bato, si Bongo lang, baka isa lang sa mga Duterte makapasok, it is possible that the tide could turn, or at least in 2025 to 2026. And who knows, maybe the Nograleses will perform very well in Davao politics. And maybe many of the DDS people in Mindanao at the LGO level and all will do very weak. And then you have the heat from the ICC coming in and all of that. In that scenario, actually, I do not agree with Ronald na it's not doable in 2025. I think it's quite doable in 2025 after elections. And my sense is, understanding how Marcos operates, understanding how essentially the algorithm of this administration is, I think their strategy would be to pin down the Dutertes, but not going for the impeachment option yet, but pin them down, make sure they don't win many seats, and send a clear signal to the Filipino people na tapos ng panahon ng mga Duterte, so you don't even have to look at 2028. But there's one element that I have not discussed here yet. And that's very, very important. That's very, very important. The shadow of 2028. So now if you look at it, guys, I'm doing game theory here, right? So in game theory, you look at how different actors calculate based on their assessment of the calculation of other players. And then in that iterative and interactive context, pwede ka magkakaroon ng scenarios, and then you can assign probabilities. All right? This is essentially what I'm doing. I do game theory whenever I do political analysis in the Philippines. And fingers crossed, so far we didn't do too bad. But going back to this, so hindi ito marites, game theory lang to, right? This is serious stuff, by the way. Going back to this, I mean, we could even draw a graph here and show to you probabilities and all of that. But anyway, going back to this, knowing the algorithm administration, I think their hope is pin down nila do good enough, and then the question will be, I doubt Romualdez will be competitive for 2028. I doubt Gibo will even think running next year. So the big question here, which we're not discussing, is the Tulfo factor. I think the Tulfo factor will be the biggest factor determining what will be the next big move of the administration when it comes to dealing with Dutertes. Because if you look at all of the surveys, published and unpublished, from what we know, You already can see the published one by Pulse Asia, but the unpublished one we see, Tulfo is the one who can beat Sara. He's actually beating already Sara, but not by too much. But if admin supports Tulfo, and in this case I'm talking about Raffy Tulfo, if Raffy Tulfo can find a joint ticket that balances the ticket, and at the same time convinces the administration, mahirap yan, but I think if the Tulfo factor is addressed, 2025, even 2026, may time pa rin sila. And that's precisely why Sara mentioned the possibility na baka hindi siya yung maging Duterte na tatakbo sa 2028, because I think she also recognizes na she's a bit vulnerable and she peaked too early. Now, having said that, the Tulfo factor is important, but the Tulfos are complications to themselves. I think if there's I think the biggest possible obstacle to Raffy Tulfo running for the president, becoming president, is another Tulfo ruining his momentum. Because it's very possible that Erwin Tulfo or Ben Tulfo, one of them will top the Senate race next year. And I don't know, it could go crazy from there. But I think if Raffy Tulfo plays his card well, and I think so far has played his card very, very well, hindi siya masyado sumasama sa away ng mga Duterte and Sara. Nung in-interview natin siya, he didn't want to talk about Sara at all. Ina-attack siya ng right and left ng mga pro-Sara people and all of that. But yeah, I think so far he's just eye on the ball without even showing that he's looking at that ball to begin with. So very astute of Raffy Tulfo so far. But in my understanding, Raffy Tulfo will be the deciding factor here on how the administration move forward. Because if alam ng Kongreso and even Senado na Tulfo is the administration bet, and knowing that Tulfo can beat Sara, then definitely BBM has time, not only this year, but also next year, if not also all the way until 2027, to do what they believe is best for them or perhaps for the country. So now we can see all of these moving parts are coming together. Kasi ito yung hindi natin na-discuss when I was with Ronald. Because Ronald is adamant na dapat gawin ngayon, and yet he also admits, as I showed you the date line, medyo too late na talaga to do the impeachment full now. But I think if the Tulfo factor is addressed, pwede nilang gawin yan next year. So I think, for now, scenario 1 or 2, but who knows, scenario 3 is possible next year. On that note, thank you very much, guys. So there's no notes, nothing. I'm just saying all of this out of my mind. Hopefully, I'll try to write it down in a column or analysis, because ang daming moving parts, and I think this is where I can say papunta pa lang tayo sa exciting part. On that note, thank you very much. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat sa lahat ang nakinig sa atin. I'm glad that at least for the first time in a long time, we were able to do a little bit on what happened? Na-disconnect pala ito dito sa Twitter. Sabi ko, yun ang problema na multiple. But at least dito sa YouTube and also dito sa... Yeah, I'm using my postpaid here, so hindi ko alam ba't di kaya nito sa postpaid na. But anyway, I think a lot was already caught here. But anyway, thank you very much again sa mga nakinig sa atin. And please continue to support us on different platforms. Deep Dive with Richard Hidarian, dun sa Spotify, dun sa Apple Podcast. I really, really appreciate that. Okay, so this was a lecture type. And I'll tell you what, my role model for this is David Runciman of Cambridge University. If you look at his podcasts, he does this kind of a lecture type, straight to the point discussion. I really, really like that. I felt swak yan sa akin. I think Ezra Klein kind of also does that. But Ezra Klein is a journalist, so different approach na. So I just felt once in a while we have to have this. I won't call it a classroom lecture type, but I think this kind of a straightforward, multi-layered analysis way. Maybe hindi kayo natawa. I mean, maybe hindi naman kailangan matawa kayo. I mean, I know that people are looking for entertainment. Alam ko gusto ng tao bardagulan or marites and all of that. But you know what? It comes a time when I say, wala akong pake kung 10 manood sa atin or 10 million manood sa atin. We have to give the people the best possible political analysis they can get. And free. For free ito. Now, kung nasaktan yung ego mo or hindi ma-absorb yung system mo, problema mo na yan. Alright? As I said, it's not for everyone, right? On that note, thank you very much, guys. Maraming salamat. Again, continue please to support us. Yes, on TikTok. Kahit sinisensor nyo ako, shadow ban, whatever. Okay lang yan. Wala akong pake. Go lang ako. Kahit kanina, ang dami nag-troll sa atin. Sinisira yung momentum natin. Sorry, it's not gonna work. Once I get into the zone, I'm all in, guys. And I'm already gonna be a machine. Alright? Thank Lord that He gave me that kind of ability to focus and get the ball rolling. For anyone who has watched me, my lectures all around the world, you can check my lectures at Harvard Law School, at Stanford University, Johns Hopkins, going on. Once I get into mode, I go for it. I don't care. It's 1 hour and 4 hours, 6 hours, I'll give the lecture. Alright? I will go for it. And that's what I was going to do. Now, kanina lang, before this, kasi alam ko yung kabilang channel, medyo busy pa sila, I was just saying, okay, habang, basa muna tayo ng Hemingway, une génération perdue and all of that. Like, yeah, I was thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, people were brave back in the day. 100 years ago, people were going to war, risking their life, and yet living beautiful lives, and yet writing beautiful letters, beautiful books, leading, gorgeous existence against difficulties and all of that. And if the Fitzgeralds and Hemingways were supposedly part of the génération perdue or lost generation, well, you could also say that to a certain degree about us millennials. Not a single millennial has served in the Senate yet. There are not too many millennials in the Congress. The many that are there are from dynasties. The one millennial or two could make it to Senate is from dynasty. So in short, we are a politically backward country. My whole generation millennials who have been at the forefront of tech, journalism, science, here and all around the world, we have been denied influence and position of power for far too long. And we have to correct that. And we can only correct that if we are serious and starts with serious thinking first. So yun ang unahin natin ngayon. Yung mga dami nagtatanong, Richard, anong balak mo? Ikaw, hinay lang tayo. Let's get it right first here. Let's do proper analysis. Dahil isa sa pinakamalaking problema natin, aside from my coniotic accent, isa sa pinakamalaking problema natin, guys, is that there are many people there throwing out solutions, but solutions that don't make sense at all. There are many people there who are telling us they have the solutions, but their solutions do not make sense at all. Because it's not based on proper, serious analysis. There are a lot of people there who are pretending that they're fighters, they're there for the country. Ang daming mga tao dyan na biglang matapang ngayon, biglang nagva-vlog na, biglang daming sinasabi. You were not there during the Digong time. We were there. We took the punches. We got the death threats. We were pushed into exile almost. But, we stood our ground. So we were marooned. We have been through the war. We had our own version of war. And we're fighting back and we'll continue to fight back, God willing, because we believe in this cause. And the cause here is to make sure na hindi maging lost generation of millennials. We were not able to be so successful in shaping politics in the past decade or so, but I'm looking at Vico Soto. I'm looking at a lot of good friends who are doing a lot of good things. I'm looking at friends in Thailand, PITA, and Move Forward Party, who are now reconstituting themselves as a new party and without any defections, or what they call Cobra in Thailand. Of course, Thai version of Cobra. I'm looking at all of these people and I'm so inspired. And I'm saying, okay lang, ayusin natin yan. But first, proper analysis. I'm tired of pakyut lang. I'm sick and tired of mga paulit-ulit na moralistic, simplistic, yung mga ganun discussion. If you want to change a country, you have to be serious. And part of being serious is to look at what is the Philippines as it is. We're not Norway. We're not New Zealand. Okay? I've been to Scandinavia. I've been to New Zealand. I've tried to study those countries. We're not those countries. We're culturally different. We're different in every sense of the word. But there are things we can learn from some of our neighbors. In Thailand, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Latin America. Yes, sometimes there are also some best practices we can learn here and there to push for something better. And hopefully one day, yung ating mga youth leader ay hindi katulad ni, wag na yung mga cheese whiz na yan, panoorin nyo lang si yung kasama po natin. Ayaw na yung mga pakit na yan, mga ganun. We need something serious, okay? We need something serious. So, thank you very much. Alam ko, sometimes I say things na hindi tugma doon sa ideolohiya nyo, doon sa paniwala nyo, or hindi tugma doon sa feelings nyo. But I'm sorry, guys. If you want to be serious, we have to overcome our prejudices and blind spots and ignorance and all of that. Because to the best of my ability, it's already 10:30 p.m. I made sure that I give you a coherent, straight to the point, multi-layered, multi-scenario analysis and leave it to you guys. Because this is what we should do. Critical thinking. We should think for ourselves. As I always say, a good teacher is not someone who tells you what to do. Yung magaling na guro, hindi na sasabihin sa'yo, etong gawin mo. Ang magaling na guro, tuturuan ka paano mo gawin yung gusto mong gawin. Tuturuan ka ng techniques. Tuturuan ka ng methods. Passes down a certain sensibility or structure of emotion, if I can use it in a more academic way. And then, bahala na kayo umusga. Bahala na kayo mag-decide. So, this is what we do, guys, dito sa platform natin. Hindi tayo kasing big time ng mga iba. Hindi tayo kasing ng mga mabait na mga kabilang channel. Minsan nakakairita tayo. Minsan naiabangan ng tao sa atin. Minsan naiapalans ng tao sa atin. But it's their loss. It's their loss because they're gonna miss this kind of serious discussion. At the end of the day, I wouldn't do this every single day, every single night, every single week. Traveling all around the world. Nakailan travels na tayo. By the way, hindi ito yung these are legit travels and talks and lectures. Because I believe in a cause. And what we're doing dito sa platforms natin is part of that cause. And I told you, parati ko sinasabi, wala akong pake kung sinong binoto mo last elections. But I want to make sure you vote for the right people in the next elections. I want to make sure you care about next elections. I want to make sure you care about humanity, your country, and your people. Alright, mahalaga sa akin yan. So whether solid DDS ka, yan katulad ni Sir, or solid loyalist ka, or solid isko ka, or solid Lenny ka and all, I know at the end of the day, lahat tayo mahal natin ng bayan natin. I'll tell you what, yes, may mga siraulo dyan, may mga ganun, yeah. But I think lahat tayo, gusto naman natin talaga yung best para sa bayan natin. Kasi gusto natin na proud tayo. Kaya nga nung nanalo ng gold si Yulo, lahat tayo natuwa. Ewan ko na kayo, ayaw ko nang pumasa. But, do you get what I'm saying? Pag nananalo yung mga sports people natin, inaangkin natin para sa ating bayan. Kasi at the end of the day, all of us, tama si Mama Eden, solid pro-Philippines tayo, di ba? Solid pro-Philippines tayo. Medyo iba yung mga pananaw natin, medyo iba yung tingin natin, medyo iba yung methods natin. But at the end of the day, lahat tayo gusto natin umangat yung bayan natin. Lahat tayo gusto natin umunlad yung bayan natin. Para lalong masarap maging Pilipino. And speaking of sarap, you see, I so much care about this na isa sa mga maliit na ginagawa natin is we're trying to also promote Filipino food in my own way. Di ba ang sarap ng pakiramdam pag nakikita mo na-appreciate yung pagkain natin, yung kultura natin. Eh di ang sarap din siguro ng pakiramdam kung na-appreciate ng ibang bansa yung pag-unlad natin, yung pag-angat ng ating antas sa ekonomiya, sa politika, teknolohiya. Kayang-kaya natin yan, guys. Kaya-kaya natin yan, guys. You know, I meet colleagues and friends, tapos may mga bata sila. And you know, kids, wala silang filter. They're suddenly asked, oh, you're from Philippines. Also, you're 10 years behind, 15 years behind. I said, no, it depends where you're from. And then, sali yung tatay nung isa sabi niya, yeah, actually, if you go to some part of the Philippines, they're even more advanced than us here. You know, like BGC, Makati, and all. But gusto ko sana buong Pilipinas ay katulad ng BGC and Makati or whatever. Para hindi tayo para walang flooding, no? Para walang bagyo. But you know what I'm saying? I come from Baguio. So, hindi naman kami mayaman, but I think middle kami. Middle class kami sa Baguio. I think it's a middle class city. I'm always proud of that. Of course, nag-deteriorate ang Baguio and all. Mahabang usapan yan. Interview natin ulit si Mayor Magalong and that. But I always felt, that kind of a middle, dignified, good life that we had in Baguio, kaya yan sa buong bansa kung ayusin lang natin. Kaya ako, kahit ganyan politika, pag pumunta ako sa Davao, nakikita ko yung mga gandang lugar sa Davao, natutuwa ako. Noon napunta ako sa Cebu, natutuwa ako na nagde-develop ng Cebu. Gusto ko talaga mag-succeed yung bayan natin So, I hope lang guys, you don't take itong mga different points of view, wrongly. At the end of the day, isa lang yung destination natin. Maybe we just have different ways of getting there. And maybe minsan, makinig lang kayo ng konti sa akin. Ikaw rin, Mr. Amir, ayan. Yan. Troll ka naman Obvious. Alright. And, there's a reason why I interrupt my own lecture by doing this. Because I'm showing to you guys, dapat lumaban tayo. Huwag tayo magpabully. Alright? Huwag tayo magpabully. Okay? Huwag tayo magpa-intimidate. You fight back. Lalo kung laos na sila. On that note, thank you very much. God bless. Talk to you soon. Please, again, don't forget, 5-star rating if you think we deserve it, and share it, and subscribe para go lang tayo at continue itong momentum natin. Salamat, God bless, and talk to you soon.